All right, guys, let's get started this week. So, as we always like to start off, I like to start off with some review from either Apple Podcasts or Amazon, or even just some of the messages that come in that guys send. So, this week we have got a Apple Podcast review from Jehu77. So, thank you, Jehu. Yes, please is how it's titled. Wow, this is really great. Funny how the message of truth arrives just when I need it most. Subscribed and looking forward to catching you up on the previous episodes while awaiting the next one. Keep up the hard work. Well, thank you, Jehu. I sure plan on keeping up the hard work. It's been so rewarding. I get to talk to guys like Troy Mangum. Troy, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. You've got the craziest background. I've got a friend with a similar background, differently. You're a missionary, a hardcore punk singer, substance abuse counselor, a busker. We'll get into what a busker is. Longboarder, exotic fruit farmer, vert skater, singer songwriter, software engineer, manager, traveling hitchhiker, and seminary dropout. Like the last one just killed me when I got to it. So, welcome to the show, Troy. We're going to talk about your new book, and I'm sure we'll talk about your podcast as well. But busker, what the heck?
Oh yeah, busker. So busker. So I lived in Europe for a while, and they call street musicians buskers.
Yes, a rarely used term around here, but yes, yeah.
Yeah. So
That
I
is
was
cool.
my claim to fame on that is that I was a youth pastor and I was broke, and I needed to buy my wife a gift, and so I went out on the street and played songs and sang for money so that I could buy my wife a birthday present.
That is awesome. When you have something that like just gets you fired up, you'll do anything
That's right.
to
I will embarrass
accomplish it.
myself in public.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And we didn't even talk about the fact that you're a Lumbee Indian tribal member. I have no idea, never heard of Lumbee.
Right.
You live in North Carolina, your wife Kathy, and you got four kids. So what the
Yeah.
heck is a Lumbee Indian? Where is that?
So we're based out of North Carolina, and they used to be called the East Cherokee Indians, but they
Okay.
were of a different tribal descent. And it has a long history with the North Carolina coast with something called the Lost Colony. And so it's a group that lives in the central part of North Carolina. They're state recognized. They've sought federal recognition as a federal tribe for the United States, but they haven't been able to achieve that, but they're recognized as a local tribe. And so my mom's a full-blood Native American and part of that tribe. And so am I, and my kids will be soon here this month or this.
So what does that get you? What benefits does that get you?
You go to the powwow, you can free dance in the powwow, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to. It's just more of an affiliation. Like God's really kind of resurrected my interest in my Native heritage. And if you look at something called, I don't want to go in. There's something called Hochoka Men that I've started that will help young men grow into masculinity through male initiation ceremonies. And it's based on the Bible and Native American practices, and it's Hocoka. And so God's kind of resurrected a lot of my Native American roots, and I'm using them to help other men.
And yeah, I was saying, I think men, just by checking into things like that, can resurrect that in their own soul, like that
absolutely.
Fire and passion and everything again. So as I'm looking up stuff to learn to help my own daughters out with, I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. Or I forgot that, or I haven't been practicing that, or whatever it is. So the Hocoka Men, that I loved when I read about that about you. And by studying, practicing, teaching, we learned so much.
I've been around men's ministries a long time, and you see a lot of the sort of the Scottish and Irish and English and European backgrounds. And so you got the swords and the kings and the knights and the Celts and I believe that God puts treasures in our heritage to give to our children. And so if we can go there and say, well, Lord, what is it that is particular about the Scots, or particular about my particular background, or whatever it is. And I think that God always puts treasures there for us to be able to pass on to our children that are truly like from the Lord, that just happens to be represented in a certain people group.
Yeah, I agree. The generational, rather
Yeah,
than let's sidetrack onto that, let's just jump
that's
right
a
into
big
your book.
topic.
Let's jump right into your book because
Yeah, sure.
we could miss the whole thing because there's so much to talk about with you. But Fatherhood Faceplants, I love the book cover, love the title,
Yeah,
and what dad can't relate to messing up,
yeah, really.
and how many times a day. So
Yeah, that's so true.
yeah, so tell us a little bit about how the book came about.
Sure,
I haven't read it. I've only read excerpts.
sure.
And I'm
Um,
certain that you had to become super vulnerable with embarrassing things. So tell us about that.
yeah. So I've had in my heart that I felt like I had something that the Lord had helped me learn as a dad that I could help other dads with. And I've had that for 15 years. And I did a little blog years ago to try to help dads. I've written a lot to try to help dads. I run a podcast. I would have topics that I thought would help dads. And it's just been one of those back in the back burner dreams that I've had. And so about 2.5 years ago, my family and I went on a big adventure with God and we became missionaries. And I thought that was going to be what we were going to do, like long term. This is what we're doing now. But the Lord had other plans. And so when we arrived back to the United States and kind of back to my old life, living in suburbia, working a corporate job, that kind of thing, I was like, well, I've always wanted to write a book. And so that's kind of how it came about. And it was, I don't consider myself a good writer. Even though I've done blogs, books are a totally different category. It's like 20 minutes to write something impactful to, months and months and months and months to write something that may or may not be valuable years down the road, is another task. And so that's how it came about. And with the encouragement of my wife and my friends, I started with God to say, okay, God, help me out. And I set aside some time, like 6 to 7 in the morning or 6 to 8 in the morning before I go to work. And I would just sit and write with God's help. And that's the long story of how it came to be.
And so from that point, as you're writing and just putting stuff on paper and turning it into a book,
Yeah.
where did the fatherhood faceplants come from? And
Yeah.
tell us about the book a bit.
Yeah. So the faceplants part is that I came to recognize that there's a point in time where men, the way that they do life runs, they hits a dead end. And I'd say it's probably about the mid 30s
Mid 30s,
where,
I agree.
yeah, where it's just sort of like, you're fooling your wife, you're fooling everybody, you're just kind of running your own MO. And then all of a sudden, all the ways that you've been doing life kind of come to a head. And you're like, hey, this isn't working anymore. Like, I can't dupe my wife anymore. I can't, act like nothing's going on with my kids anymore. Like, or I've made some mistakes. And they're open to being, well, maybe there's something I need to learn. That was my story. And I was I had a dad, but I would consider myself somewhat fatherless in the sense that my dad was loved work. And that's all he did. That's all he was about. And so I was sort of left to, well, I just got to figure this out. Well, insert marriage and kids. Okay, I'll just figure this out. And I just made a ton of mistakes. And so, but the God really fathered me through those mistakes and then basically guided me and says, you understand, you took about this approach. I want to teach you a new way to do it. And it took me really a lifetime to learn these lessons because there was certain key lessons God showed me. And so for me, I wanted it to be a doorway for men that recognize, you know what? Yeah, I've made some mistakes, but I don't really know how to overcome my anger. I don't know how to change. I don't know how to do these things. And so the book becomes a vulnerable story of some honest things that I dealt with. And I had a fairly traumatic background, so there was some pretty nasty stuff. But then the goodness of God to guide and direct me and say, do this, try this, or, take this approach. And it really became a guiding for me as a dad to help my kids. And so I think that's really what it's about. So it's half of the book is really sort of a story journey about my life and my kids. And the other half of the book is really having seen all that. Now, here are the things that God showed me to really help men grow. And really the big message of the book is you pass on who you are, not what you know. So you got to be the very best version of yourself in God that you can be, because that's ultimately what you pass on, right? You can know what's right and do what's wrong, and you will pass on what is wrong, even though you don't want to. And you'll say, hey, do as I say, not as I do. They're going to do as you do. So as a dad, you've got to get the hidden areas that you think nobody sees. Guess what? It will pop up in the generations. You know, the little secret sins. Oh, no, it's showing up in my kids, 20 years later. These are
Yes.
that's the kind of things that I'm trying to help dads say, you can overcome all of the mess and really pass on something beautiful to your kids that you're proud of, with no skeletons in the closet, like you're really free now.
Yeah, not that Solomon's sins were hidden, but King Solomon, I was reading about him, wisest guy in the world,
Right.
but
Yeah.
doesn't know how to apply that wisdom to his own life.
Yeah. Yeah. And David's such a great, like I use the story of David in one of the chapters about some of the guilt he dealt with, and that as an because I believe that one of the biggest pains of fatherhood is when you do faceplant, the guilt of that faceplant. And what leads most men to passivity is what I believe is guilt, because you're like, well, who am I to say, or how could I? And so they move away from the family because they feel guilty, and they become passive dad, right? Because they've done something wrong. But the blood of Jesus is stronger than the wrong you've done. And God calls us to actively parent, to actively father, to be engaged. And don't let your face plants rob you of engagement. And that was David's story. Like that's a longer story, but the short of it is he didn't engage when he should have. And it cost further turmoil in his family. And it was all from the Bathsheba thing, you know.
Yes.
Bathsheba, he sins with Bathsheba. One of his sons rapes his daughter, right? Don't you think that he's connecting the dots? He's like, this is my fault, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then instead of making it right, he does nothing for years with Absalom. Absalom overthrows the kingdom, and it was all because of dad guilt. Like, you can read the book and get more on that. But yeah, it's so I'm really trying to help dads, like, say, hey, get out of feeling sorry for yourself, get out of being passive. Sure, we all make mistakes, but
What's
the blood
what's
of Jesus.
one that you've ran into, like, might be the main one or just anyone that's
Yes.
coming to mind, that a dad does, and then that pushes them into passivity?
Yeah, I would say that uh, uh, a man's anger, um, and like having like really strong emotional responses to things that aren't warranted, that emotional response, for me, I think can unsettle the man, because like, why am I responding? So I, when I think about it, this really isn't a big deal, but yet I'm responding like it's huge, and I'm so upset about it.
That one's
And
a good one. That one's a really good one, because as a kid, I grew up, and my parents often talked about, responding with anger and how to, and so for whatever reason, I've always been pretty good at that, other than with one person in my life. However, as I talk to, there's certain instances where I can get triggered. However, I don't go and yell and carry
right,
on and punch my fist through the walls. However, I talk to guys, and guys oftentimes tell me that they get so angry that they lose their mind. And I'm
yeah.
like, tell me more about that. And they often ask me, hey, can you help me with this? I recognize it's a massive problem. So interesting you brought that one up, top of mind. Uh,
Yeah, so
yeah,
I
tell
would
us
say
about it.
the source of that is a brokenness somewhere in the man's life. Jesus said he came to bind up the brokenhearted. That anger stems from something, and it's typically not your family related. It's usually related to something in childhood. And and most men want to muscle through, like, I'm just not going to become angry, yet their emotions overtake them. And it's because there's a broken gear somewhere down in their heart that's tied to something they've experienced, and they need God's help to go back and heal that. And so I'm a big advocate of counseling. I'm a big advocate of being honest with other men. And most men are sort of like the go forward types, like, what a waste of time to go backwards. What a waste of time. Like, those are days gone by. Like, what do you want me to go, suck my thumb and feel sorry for myself? And that's going to help me. It's like, no, you're going to man up and say, I take responsibility that I have an uncontrolled anger problem and I don't understand where it comes from. You're going to go after, with God's help, where is that coming from? And that becomes you taking responsibility, having courage, being brave, and letting God take what you probably don't want to talk about and healing that. And you will find that as you allow God to put you through a healing process, now when they spill the milk, you're not losing your mind, and like in my case, I can say that, like, a lot of my anger stemmed from like a lack of respect. Like, anytime with my kids, it was always like I would fly off the handle if I ever smelled a lack of respect in anything they did. But my brokenness was that I felt undervalued as an individual. And so, by God, I'm going to extract value out of you kids so I feel like a man, or I feel good. And it's like, it's not their job, the Lord says respect, child respect their child, but child respect the parent. But if that parent is broken, like, the children aren't going to fix that, right? And trying to extract respect out of your kids out of anger is completely broken and wrong, right? You want to be respectable. You want to be honorable. You want to be, gracious and loving and approachable. And out of that comes the respect. That's like, oh, we love Dad and we want to listen to what he says because we know he loves and values us. When you're going off and losing your mind because you feel lack of respect because of some broken thing with your childhood, like, God can shore that up. And that's what he did for me. He allowed me to have value, feel honored through God helping me. And then I stopped being such a respect Nazi.
have you got a story that you can share? I'd love to hear one from your background.
Oh gosh.
You can admit the kid's name, whatever it is. But...
Yeah. So I think I had the biggest struggle with my boys because as young men grow up, they push against you, right? It's part of the nature of growing up and becoming their own man. And I think that I'm trying to think of a specific example of because honestly, there were just so many times when I felt like I was being disrespected. And it was probably with my oldest son the most, where he would push back on me. Like, I might ask him, I know nothing is specific is coming to mind, so I don't have a tangible story, but I know I remember the feelings. And it was basically, he would push against me because maybe I was gruff or demanding or just unreasonable in how I would approach, like, something I would ask him to do. And I would just expect some immediate, like, yes, Dad response, but I wouldn't get that. And then it would just escalate into a fight.
Yeah.
But I would approach things so aggressively because I was kind of, it wasn't relational. It's just like, I'm your dad, you're doing this, and this is how it's going to be. And when he's 16, 17, he's like, he was like, well, I don't want to do that, and like, we never really went to blows, like physical blows, but it got pretty heated. And I would say that now our relationship, like, I'm very conscientious to be loving and respectful. I can still ask, not demand. I can still ask, I can still expect. I think that's a big one for dads, like expectations. But I can do it in a way that makes it achievable for them versus my way or the highway. This is the way it's going to be. No questions asked, kind of a approach to fathering, which is not relational. I don't know if that helps.
When you switched away from that dictator dad.
Yeah.
and shifted to this new philosophy.
Yeah.
Uh, what are some keys to the new philosophy for you when you feel maybe you get that gut instinct, that feeling that you talked about, that lack of respect? Because I resonate with that one. When I feel that lack of respect, and I think 100% of every man I know has said that respect thing, man, that gets me like that.
Yeah, that's
Whoever's giving him lack of respect, they're ready to fight over that one.
yeah. So I think the difference has been, I am far more interested in the integrity of my relationship with my kids, than I am in their, like, obedience or quick to respond to me, ness, if that could be called a thing. And so what I talk now respectfully to my children as best I can, in that I ask questions more than I give statements with exclamation points. Right? I try to draw things out. I try to come to a conclusion about something that needs. And I would find that the more relational I am with kids or with my kids, the more that they are responsive to the things that need to be done. And that would be just like, think about God and I's, our relationship with God. It's sort of like you come to a point where you're like, I want to obey you, not I have to, not I'm afraid I'm going to get punished, not I'm afraid some bad thing's going to happen, but I genuinely, out of my heart, want to obey you. I want to do it your way. I want to follow you. That is the goal of parenting, out of love, that you are creating a connection to where your kids are like, yeah, I'd like to, I want to, right? And most times when we're doing it sort of a broken way, it's the dictatorial, it's the I'm more stronger and more powerful than you, and I can make you, or I can restrict you. But you're missing the heart completely in that, all of that. And you might achieve the quote goal, but more often than not, when the kid gets a smell of freedom in that environment, they're like, I'm out, like I'm done, like I don't want a relationship with you. You never wanted a relationship with me, right? And I don't have to obey you anymore because I'm gone and you're not paying my bills. So,
right.
So now what? Now what leverage do you have on me now? And it's sort of like, if your parenting is built on that kind of quote leverage, I could get you, I can force you. It's not even close to being relational. I know that's a little off topic, but right now my whole intention is to keep the integrity of the relationship. And that means even when I mess up or they mess up, there can be reconciliation. They understand that, hey, I'm not perfect. God's teaching me to, and I'm sorry.
What does that look like? You messed up. What does that look like?
So like now I'm on a short leash in the sense that, like, I will say, like, I might like go at my son about something. It seems to always my sons. I have more grace than my daughters, whatever. I'll go at my son about something. And then, I'll have a quiet moment within a day or two. And the Lord would be like, you need to go back and make that right. Like, you handled that poorly.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I was right, or whatever, that argument. But ultimately I come back and be like, even though maybe what I said was right, but how I said it was wrong. Maybe my point or my intention was right, but the way I approached his heart was wrong. And, and being able to allow God to guide you and just say, look, I'm really sorry how I approached that. I shouldn't have said it that way. And then just let it be. Like, most dads want to have that apology and be like, I'm sorry I did that, but I was right to do this, this, and this. So they're really not allowing vulnerability there. They're just being like, I'm begrudgingly doing what the Lord wants me to do to reconcile the relationship, but I'm still going to prove that I'm right.
Yes,
that's not reconciliation. Reconciliation is, I really shouldn't have approached that way. Pause, be quiet, allow vulnerability, and allow them to say, I forgive you, or I'm still upset about it, and let it go.
So, Dad, I'm still upset about it. I'm still mad.
Yeah. And then you've got to be like, okay, well, I understand that. Maybe we can talk, a little bit later. And the letting God deal with the situation. Because men, we want to just insert ourselves and just fix it, write it, correct it. Whereas I find that in relationships, it's not like math and it's not like working on a car. Like it's not, you will get in these weird spaces that may last a while, and you got to trust God through those times.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and a lot of times that's been the difficult part. And, but I can say, having done that approach, okay, so hear me, dads, having done that approach, God always seems to write it later. And it always comes in, and it's sincere, and it truly does bring reconciliation and healing. Had you done it, or had I done it my way, it maybe have driven a further wedge into something I already did something. Now I'm driving a further wedge into it, trying to make it right. Now I've just made it worse.
Here's something I've been working on. So when I get that response of I'm mad, or and they kind of shut down,
Yeah.
I'll there's a book called Never Split the Difference. It's by a guy named Chris Voss. He used to be a terrorist negotiator, #1 in the
Oh
world.
boy.
And I never wanted to read that book. And then I heard more about it. And it's more about questioning, getting the other side to open up, and that trust conversation. And so he's got a technique he uses: sounds like, feels like, or looks like. Dad, I'm still mad. Sounds like you're still mad. I am. It looks like you're still mad. You're right. I am, because, and then it allows him to open up more. And if one of those three don't fit, sometimes you can use a technique he calls mirroring, where you just say the last 3 to 5 words that they said. And
Yeah.
it's unbelievable when you use the last 3 to 5 words. They typically just keep going. And you can, sounds like you're mad, or you're mad. Yes, that's right. I'm mad.
Yeah.
That's right. You are mad. Yes, Dad. And you wouldn't believe, you just keep it going.
Well, and the
So you
thing
can
that I
hear them, letting them know that you hear.
Yeah, and I think it's so key, because when you hear your child's heart, and let's say their perspective is wrong, they got it wrong. Like they literally, and you can see it. You're a dad, and you're like, you're seeing it wrong. I know they're saying it wrong, and they're upset, but they're saying it incorrectly. In that case, there has to be an honoring that it is something they are feeling, they are experiencing it. Like, this is how I felt when you did. This is how I experienced when you said. And you could be like, I didn't intend that. I didn't mean that. And so therefore your feelings about all that are completely wrong, and you're wrong. That is a stupid way to handle it. And it's not a wise way as a father. So what you need to
But
be
it's
able
the
to,
easy way. It's
oh,
the
it's the
way
easy
that
way. Yeah, it's the
I
easy
can
way.
just jump right to that.
Yeah, just jump right to that. And it's a quick way to shut them down and shut the relationship down again. And what you need to do in those situations is be like, just be curious, right? I mean, instead of being like, always making these definitive statements with periods and exclamation points, why not ask more questions?
Yes.
Why not be curious? Don't you care? Like, have you never gotten something wrong and been so like emotionally intent on something that you was wrong later on? Have you never had that experience? You need to create an environment where they can have that experience, and it may be against you and you may feel defensive, but pull your big boy pants on and you can handle it. It's okay. You can handle it for a season, because typically when they're allowed to express what they're feeling, sensing, whatever, you get really to the crux of it. And usually it's a hurt. It's a lie about them or a lie about the situation. And what you're trying to get to is not your truth. You're trying to get to a reconciliation of the relationship around what is true, right? What really, really happened. Like, they might take something a certain way. You didn't mean for them to take it away. They took it that certain way, and just say, I'm so sorry. That's how that came across. Versus, you were wrong to feel that way. You were wrong to view it that way. It's a different approach.
Very different approach. And I find that approach to be incredibly effective.
Yeah. And you can't do it if you're all broken up inside. Yeah, good luck at that conversation, because you're going to get triggered all over the place. You're getting misjudged. It's unjust. It's in wrong. You're disrespected. Like, that's why you got to be, as a dad, shored up. Like, God shore you up. Let there not be chinks in the armor or opportunities for Satan to pull at anything. right? Let that area, and that's not an overnight process. And that's a little bit what the book's about. It's the process, right? It will take a process, but if you will submit to it, God will journey you through and you'll be stronger, and the chinks in the armor won't be as many, if any.
That's awesome. And you've got so many guys that have endorsed this book, and the endorsements are just incredible. I love them. I love them. So, one thing I read, fearful dads raise anxious, nervous children.
Mm.
And I'm not a dad that is fearful. However, when I see fearful dads, when I see anxious moms, when I
Yeah.
see anxious pet owners, you see that transfer, like absolutely that transfers. And the dads that are bold, their kids typically have more confidence and are more bold. So that one sentence really resonated. Fearful
Mm.
dads raise anxious, nervous children. And I know that's not what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. We pass on, maybe I've said it and I'll say it again, is we pass on who we are more than what we know. And that's why if you have a propensity towards fear or any other thing, that's where you want God to really help you, because he transforms who we are, and then that becomes who we can pass on. It doesn't guarantee your kids will be amazing. It just gives them a starting point that's far stronger, right? It's sort of like, another way I put it is, do you want to be a wall in front of your kids when, if they were to want to sincerely follow God with all of their heart? Would you be a wall, or would you be a wind in their sails? Are they going to have to scale over your issues to follow God with all their heart because, of fear or lying or whatever things that you put there as sort of a barrier? Or are you going to be able to be like wind in their sails and say, go further, go farther in God, and become an inspiration to them? Are you an inspiration or a barrier? If your kid was all out for God, would you be an inspiration or a barrier? Good
Have you
question.
ever measured that or intentionally set situations up so that you're the wind in the sails of family members?
Yes. I initiated both my boys into manhood. That was very intentional. It took a lot of planning and forethought, but my desire was to help them transition from I'm a boy to I am a man ceremony, something that was marking.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and part of the wind in the sail that I did was, I have this concept I called finding the thumbprint of God on your children. So it basically means God created your children. They're unique. If you have more than one, you discover that, right? Wow, they're different. How did that happen? But a lot of it's God's thumbprint, some magnificent, wonderful grace that God wants to express in the world through your child, right? They're great with people. They're great with truth. They're bold, or they're compassionate, or they're something. And you ask God, God, give me insight into your thumbprint on my kid. And when
Mm.
you get that, you just speak that over them the rest of their life. This encouraging, forward-looking, God has made you a certain way. Don't forget it. It's not tied to a job. It's not tied to a role. It's not tied to a station in life. You're married or kids. It's just a grace. The scripture comes to mind. If expressing his manifold grace in its various forms. So if you lead as if you're doing it this way. If you serve, do it this way. It's sort of like God gives us all gifts and abilities, and as a dad, if we can be intentional to call that out, it makes the world a difference. So part of my initiation with my kids was to speak those words over them, write them out, do things that are tangible, that says, this is who I see you to be in God, and it's unique to them. And that becomes a great wind in their sails, right? And I've lived long enough with my older son where he was able to look back and say, even when I was not even close to living that way, those words would ring in my ears. And I would know, I'm not really being who I really am, and it became a beacon towards where he needed to go, even though at the time he was screwing up. But I kept speaking that over him. I kept saying, hey, this is who you really are, and he'd be like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a very tangible one. The writing notes and writing things down. We had a guy on the show, Blake Brewer. He does Legacy Letter, and he's encouraging a million dads and helping coach them to
mm-hmm.
write letters to their kids, legacy letters to their kids. And going through that process with him, it was so cool thinking of all the small things that you can affirm about your kids and telling them you love them, you believe in them, and you're proud of them. So you can put that wind in their sails and really let them know firmly where they sit in your eyes. I think that just helps guide them for the future in such a good way.
Yeah, I'll add this. In my second ceremony for my youngest son, I had the important men in his life. So me, his grandparents, grandfathers, um, inspirational people that he was close to, his brother at that time, write a letter of what it means to be a godly man. And so not only did I hand him a letter of who I believe God had made him to be, he had the voice of a community of men around him and said, this is what it means to follow God and be a godly man. And that was also very tangible. So it wasn't just from a father, but from a community of men that he trusted and valued.
Wow. And then what a great exercise for those men also.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it
The
was.
permanency of writing something down that you're going to hand off
Yeah.
makes you think about the words you're going to write.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think the thing that dads need to understand is your words have power. It
Yes.
really does. And the more that you can make them pure from a good heart with God, the more power they're going to have. Because whether you like it or not, your words have power. So if they're negative, they have power. God has endued you as a dad with an impact that you're going to make. So why not make an impact for God? Instead of it being laced with crap that you have in your past or comes from things that aren't right and can kind of skew the direction you're going to give your kid. Let those words be pure because your heart's been purified. Your heart's been healed.
So often we talk at the end of the show, it's not the end. However, we say, what advice have we got for other dads? And we end with a challenge always for the dads. But it's funny, we might not talk about marriage the whole episode. We get to the end and we say, hey, have you got any tips for the guys? And every guest, almost to a fault, says, love your wives in some version of that. And I know that's a big part of your story as well,
Yeah,
loving
yeah,
your
yeah,
wife and making her a priority. Tell us a
yeah.
little bit about that, how you've done things that maybe other guys can emulate or put into action.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell the story because I love this story.
I love
So
stories. So yeah.
yeah, well, this is a good story. This is a good one. So where do I start? So I've actually been probably a better dad than I've been a husband. I just had I really was zoned in on I want to be a good dad because I didn't have a great experience. I want to be a good dad. But the husband part, I was like, oh, it would just happen. It's just going to happen. I'm not going to work at that. That will just happen. Well, it didn't just happen and it didn't go great. And I was probably doing really better as a dad than I was as a husband, to the point where my wife and I ended up getting separated. And so, I'm Christian. I love God. I try to love God sincerely, but it just came to and if you really want to know the backstory, get the book because there's a lot of backstory.
Let's pause on that for just
Yeah.
1 second. So
Yeah.
guys, if you didn't hear that, if you focus on your children so much, you lose the relationship with your wife and you'll end up a statistic. You'll be over there, your wife will be with your kids over on the other side in the other house that you're paying for.
Yes. Amen. And so I was in this state where we were separated, which was a shock. I was like, I can't believe we're here, but we got there. We ended up being separated. I was at a men's meeting at a church. This older man comes in at this men's meeting. And I basically stand up at this men's meeting saying, hey, a lot of you guys know me. I just asked for, prayer because, my wife and I are separated. This older man stands up. He has this plaque in his hand. And he said, today, my wife came to me and said, I believe God wants you to give this plaque to a man at this meeting.
Mm.
I want you to take it. Now, this plaque is something that they've had for 30 years. They bought it 30 years ago. It hangs on their mantle. It's a treasure to their marriage. And he says, okay. So he gets there, he stands up and says, this is who I think I need to give the plaque to. The plaque says, how can a man love his children? Love their mother first.
Wow.
How can a man love his children? Love their mother first. Now, what's the context? I'm separated and it looks like we're getting a divorce. She does not like me. There's good reasons why. He hands me this plaque and I'm just bawling. I'm like, I don't deserve this plaque, but it was clear message. Your issue, you need to reconcile. You need to focus on being loving to your wife. So I held that plaque as a treasure through that. We were separated for 2 years. All right.
Mm.
And God in his mercy and grace reconciled us. After we reconciled, the lady that told her husband to give the plaque to it ended up getting a cancer or something, and she was on her deathbed. And I heard about it, and my wife and I reconciled, go to her deathbed. We hand the plaque back to him and say, thank you for entrusting this to me.
Wow.
I know it was a treasure. And he just starts bawling, and he's like in his 70s, they've been married for 40 plus years. She's dying. And he says, thank you so much for giving this back to me. And I felt so unworthy to have something so precious when I did not deserve it. Like I was a scoundrel. There was reason we were separated. It was pretty much it was my fault. I wreaked a lot of havoc at home, and I didn't deserve an entrustment like that. They were a model marriage. They loved God. And that entrustment. And when I hand that plaque to them, it's just such a powerful truth that God was in the book, communicate to the masses saying, hey, marriage is key. Marriage is key. And I would say that if it's I think sometimes it is easier for guys to be a dad than a husband. Be a husband, do the hard work, be the best husband you can be. Because it only will bless the children. Because when that relationship is whole, it truly marries what God wanted in the first place for those kids. A beautiful whole relationship where you're completing one another. It's not just you got it together and they don't, or they got it together and you don't. You are completing each other. You are a whole unified unit. That is a beautiful picture that we need God and we need each other.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So selfishness, it seems like,
Oh boy.
is kind of the divisive issue in marriage. Us guys
Yeah.
can be selfish and not think about our spouses. Our kids are cute, real
Yeah.
easy to pull our attention in, and we can coach the little league team and do all the other things and spend all our time somewhere else.
Yeah.
And at that same time, kind of being selfish and not putting our wife as a priority. My guess is that the havoc that you caused involves some selfishness.
Oh yeah. Yeah, very much. It was it involves selfishness. And I think the thing that I would encourage you, and again, I kind of like, this is a put your big boy pants on moment, is like when they're running up to your kids are running up to you and saying, oh dad, we love you and you're great. And they don't know your backstory and they think you're great. Like, how hard is it to be kind to your kids when they think you're great? And then you hit teenagers here, and then it's just like, I don't know if I really want to do this, right? Well, your wife represents not the, oh, you're so great person in your life. They represent somebody that knows the real deal. They know the real consequences of your decisions. They understand the real implications of your decisions. And that's where the hard work is. And so men tend to be like, well, it's easier to be with the people that think I'm great than the people that really know who I am, meaning your wife. And so I would say, if you do the hard work, you'll reap the benefits, you'll reap the rewards. And so that's when I'm saying, don't do the easy stuff, do the hard stuff. Do the
Wow,
hard
I
stuff.
like that perspective a lot for a whole bunch of different reasons. One is, as men, we're pretty good at work, and so we probably get pats on the back at work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we do that, and we tend to expand our hours and pour our lives into that because it's easy,
Yep.
and we
We
get
get the rewards.
the rewards and respect. We can tend to pour our lives into our kids and make them a priority, and it's easy, it's fun, a little bit selfish. I talk to my kids all the time about doing the hard thing. Like, you want to do the easy thing or the hard thing? The hard thing's the one that's difficult. However, you get big rewards down the road.
Right.
Or do you want to do the easy thing? Every once in a while, they answer with the easy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
we got to
Any
walk
honesty.
through that. Yeah, we got to walk through that. But I love that analogy for us as dads also. We're always, we say we're willing to do the hard thing. We're even focused on some of the things that are hard. But when we think about our wife as a possibility in our life of that being the hard road, the hard thing to work on, that might shift some perspective a little bit there, because I personally haven't ever thought about it that way, that maybe that's the challenge. And maybe I'm avoiding that challenge in seasons, days, weeks, months, years, whatever it is. It's like, and I've had that perspective in the past about focusing on my wife as the priority. And it seems like I always need reminders. I always can
Well, I
do
think
better in that way.
it's an endurance thing, right? It's sort of like, how long are you willing to do something that's right before you get feedback? A week? You're going to be nice for a week. And if you don't get feedback, you're done. How about a month? How about you do nice things for a month and get no feedback? Are you willing to do that? How about a year? Like, how long are you willing to do what is right before God before you get feedback? And I think most men are weak in that area. They're like, yeah, I can do anything that, if there's a promised reward. Whereas in marriage, a lot of times you don't get those attaboys until they're truly earned. And that means time. It usually takes time. And men, we're just like, hey, I did the dishes, like, we're having sex tonight, right? It's like 30 minutes later, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just like they want that positive affirmation immediately. And that's where, and to me, it's just like, where's the biblical mandate to endure, to do what is right because God says it's right, and to trust by faith? There's more faith to endure. You'll get the feedback, you will get the reward. But men tend to just be so little in faith. They're like, yeah, I'll be nice for a week, and if it doesn't work out, screw that. It's just like, we're so fickle, we're so weak in that area. And that's really my testimony of reconciliation is a testimony of no credit, no cookies, no nothing, but just trying to walk with God through some very difficult things, humbling things, honest things over a long period of time. And then the reward was reaped. We got reconciled. We have a beautiful family. We have beautiful relationships with myself, my wife, and my kids. But it's only because of God and a lot of endurance. I walked with a guy during that season. He says, I've seen so many men pull the pin, like on the grenade, because they're like, I'm not doing it. I will not humble myself that much. Forget it. I won't do it. And it's like, okay. And I just had the grace to say, yeah, I'll be misunderstood or misjudged or miss whatever for years on end, but it'll all be righted at some point. And God's proven that to be true.
So earlier you mentioned but I am right. Apply that in any place you want, with your wife, with your kids, but I'm right.
Yes.
I love you, but I'm right.
Yes.
You're wrong. I'm right. Wherever you want to apply it. But every time I have that thought in my head, but I'm right, I'm like, stop, pause, think, reflect, breathe.
Yeah.
Why am I putting that thought? Why am I putting this stake down right here? This is probably the dumbest move to move forward with the thought of, but I'm right.
Yeah.
Like, let's do something different. Let's bridge this. Let's be curious. Let's ask questions, any of those things. But earlier you mentioned that. I'm like, that right there is a trigger for me to do something different than the path I'm about to go down. Red flag, something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and It's not the end of the world to be wrong. I mean, I think God knows, I wrote a book called Fatherhood Faceplants. It's such an oxymoron, it's just sort of like, how to be a strong dad and kill it every day. Like, isn't that going to sell better? It's just like, look, the reality of it is I've lived long enough to know it's okay to be wrong. In fact, it's humbling, and humility draws God's grace to your life. Don't you want God's grace in your life? It's okay. It's what you do when you're wrong. That's the whole point. You're gonna be wrong. Now what? You're gonna fight from that. You're gonna take your stand in that wrong position, or are you gonna come into the light as He's in the light, and so that what can be, comes out of your life can be clearly seen. Wow, like God's done amazing things, which is my testimony. It's my testimony is God is amazing. I'm okay. I've been a work in progress, but God, nobody's a better dad. Nobody's a better coordinator of growth. Nobody's better. And so I'm not coming at it like, oh my gosh, I've got, all these great nuggets for people. God's got great nuggets. God's got great nuggets and truths through my life, but it points back to Him. He really taught me, and I just happen to be, have enough pain that I said, okay, I'll listen now. What do you have to say?
Yes. Oh yeah, with how busy the world is, how much noise everything makes, the phones, all those things, we can tend not to listen to God.
Yes, it's very easy not to. And He, see the fruit of what you're doing. Be wise enough to be a good fruit inspector. Hey, is this working? Is this really working? Is this achieving the ultimate goal you want? And most men are just plowing ahead with no perception, no self-evaluation, no awareness, thinking that they're heading somewhere good, where they need to evaluate, hey, is this really producing what I want? Oh, it's not. Okay. Change the approach. God, how can I do this better? And to improve the relationship with my kids, or improve the relationship with my wife, or decrease my anger, or whatever. And God will, once you become open, He'll guide you. The issue is our openness.
On your podcast, you talked about an experiment you did where you took all the social media off your phone. One of the reasons, my guess, is to create some space for yourself that would allow you to also to listen to God more, but just create space that was more purposeful than the loop you were in at the time. And one of the things that you mentioned on your podcast was you noticed that you enjoyed music a lot more. And that's something that I've noticed also. What you said was, at first, when you were listening to music, you'd listen to a little bit, 20 seconds, 30 seconds in, and then your mind would drift and go, what can I do on my phone? How can I stay occupied? How can I stay busy? And after about a week, you realize that you're able to listen to the entirety of music and actually listen to it.
Yeah. So, and you and I kind of talked about this before the show, but basically, if you ever put things out there, you post something, you write something, you're whatever, you're always looking for that feedback loop, right? And but it can become an addiction, right? It's looking for the attaboys, multiple times a day with something that you've done. And I found that I was distracted, relatively miserable, because it was like maybe never enough, or it wasn't the quality of feedback that I wanted it. And it got to the point where I'm like, I gotta break this cycle. And so instead of being like time limit, I just deleted the apps, like, deleted them off of my phone. So I didn't have them at all, because I felt like what was so funny was, like, be self-aware. When you reach your phone, what are you going to? And, if it's not, and I understand work and email and things and being mobile and working, but if on the social side, if you were like going to something, and I think I ended up looking at my time and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to my phone freaking all the time. I was like, shocking to me how much I was doing it. And so I eventually took it off. And
over 80 times a day.
Yeah, or 80. Yes. I thank you for that. Thank you.
And I'm not hammering you. I'm hammering everybody that's listening right now.
Yeah.
because
It's
80 is a
shocking.
normal number. We're always reaching for that phone. You even mentioned you went to like a daughter's sporting event or something, and you sat there for a couple seconds and didn't have your phone with you, and you're like, "What am I going to do? Just sit here and be bored?"
Guys, learn the discipline. If you haven't done it, here's the challenge. You want to become more aware of your surroundings, your kids, your wife, do that. If you have a propensity towards looking at whatever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever your flavor, ESPN, delete it off your phone, right? And do it for at least a week, like not a day, but a week. Give it a week and see the difference. And you will find that you are excessively distracted more than you even realized. And yeah, I mean, because that's the last thing. I mean, the thing that breaks my heart is seeing young dads with young children who absolutely need attention. They absolutely need their father's face, like their eye-to-eye face. And if that father's face is sucked into a phone, I mean, I don't want to play armchair psychologist here, but think of the psychological impact that's going to have on that child over time. What's more important, me or the phone? Me or whatever that thing is? And it's going to be whatever that thing is. And I'm going to tell you, fastest way to grow resentment in a child over time, go ahead, just spend all that time on that phone with your kid. You'll see it. You just give it about 10 years. You'll see a lot of it. You don't have to be that dad. You can be the dad that gives a wholehearted attention. Get the phone out or delete the apps or do what it needs. Do whatever you need to do. So
Yeah, play, have fun, be there for the kids. I go to the parks, and we just had a parish picnic, and my daughter says, "Dad, do you realize you're the only adult on any of the rides?" There were
hmm,
there were a few adults that were with their kids. Most of the kids were just running around on their own, and the
yeah,
parents were doing the parent thing, talking, and there just wasn't that connection there at all. And
yeah,
granted, I like to hang out with the adults also and do that, but there
yeah,
wasn't any adults on any of the rides.
yeah. That's great. So thank God your kid noticed it.
It was so cool that she noticed it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it was they're doing a lot of this stuff for the first time, some of these rides, and how fired up and excited they were about them. And I wanted to share that experience with them, and being on the sideline versus being with them. I'm like, I really got to engage and experience that with them. It was so fun,
Yeah, yeah,
without being on the sideline on my phone,
yeah. That's
so
good. There's less important things to do that you think are more important. You know, there's less important things to do that you think are more important. Like you think it's more important to do work things while your kids are engaged in something quote unquote meaningless or silly or play. That's not more important. More important is be with your kids, you know?
yeah, if you can get into a state of carefree timelessness with your kids and your spouse,
Yeah.
it's so great where you don't have an agenda. You're not trying to check a box in the next minute to move on to the next thing. Just being there with them is awesome. Think
Yeah.
vacation without your phone.
Yes. 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 And if you can actually live that way.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be that way all the time. But if you can set up just even 30 minutes or hour blocks where that's all that's going on, no devices, no nothing,
Yeah.
and can just be with them. So, well, I love that you created your own challenge before I even asked for it. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah. That's the challenge.
Yes, yes. So I love that. Anything else that you want to share with the audience about your book, or an additional tip beyond prioritizing your wife?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it, but I'll say it again. Become the best version of yourself. Let God train you to become the best version of yourself, because you will pass on who you are more than what you know. So who you are is key. And most men try to teach from, oh, I need to do a thing, or I need to do a technique, or I need to do a tip. You are far more powerful than any technique or tip. So be powerful. Be amazing as a dad, as a person, as a follower of Christ. It will translate. It will be. That's what you want to pass on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So become better yourself,
Yeah.
and your kids are going to see what you do, and they're going
Yeah.
to emulate that, and they're going to be better adults, and it'll just carry on generation after generation. So generational curse or generational blessing.
it's an inspiration. It's sort of like, well, I'm of my father and mother, and if they can do X, or God can do X or Y, maybe God can do that for me. That's the whole point. It's providing models. We're so big on knowledge, but I think the biblical model is models, examples, real people doing real things. And you want to be one of those models to your kids. It's That's all your knowledge translates into your life. Don't think that you're truly transforming them by giving them information. You're truly transforming your kids by being what you believe, living what you value. That's in when it really matters. That
That's
teaches the
fantastic.
best lessons.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. That is so key. Model the behavior, learn who you are, grow into it,
Yeah.
and be humble. In your book, it says live uncovered. So being
Yeah.
open with your kids so they can truly get to know you, you know
Yeah.
yourself, and you know your spouse. Family all runs better when you're doing that, and when you're connected and focused on Christ.
Amen. Amen for that.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and you're just a fascinating person. Looking forward to getting to know you more and just engaging in your material. I can't wait to read the book. I'm really excited.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a real honor.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thank you, Troy. And until we meet again, look forward to connecting soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.